I've been a clinic receptionist for 3 years. I've seen anxious patients, angry patients, even patients who've passed out in the waiting room. But I've never seen someone like Mrs. Holloway. She first came in on a Tuesday morning in late October. I remember because she was my first appointment and she arrived exactly 30 minutes early. She sat in the corner chair, hands folded in her lap, just staring at the wall. Not at her phone, not at a magazine, just the blank wall. When I called her name, she stood up slowly and walked to my desk. Her smile was too wide, too fixed like she'd practiced it in a mirror but couldn't quite get it right. She handed me her insurance card without saying a word, and her fingers were ice cold when they brushed mine. The form she filled out was strange. Under emergency contact, she'd written, "None needed." Under current medications, she'd written, "Sleep is unnecessary." I almost laughed, thinking it was unnecessary. I almost laughed, thinking it was a joke, but when I looked up, she was staring directly at me with that same frozen smile. Dr. Patterson saw her for a routine physical. When she left, he seemed off. I asked if everything was okay, and he just said, "That woman hasn't blinked once during the entire examination. Not once." I brushed it off. People have nervous tics. Medical anxiety is real. But Mrs. Holloway came back. Every single Tuesday. Always 30 minutes early. Always sitting in the same corner chair, staring at the same spot on the wall. Always that smile. By her fourth visit, I started noticing the pattern. She never actually had appointments scheduled. She would just appear in our system, as if the appointments created themselves. I'd check the night before, nothing. Then I'd come in the next morning, and there it would be, Holloway, 9 a.m. Then I'd come in the next morning, and there it would be, Holloway, 9 a.m. I mentioned it to my manager, Sarah. She pulled up the records and went pale. These appointments, they're all booked from inside the clinic, from your computer. At 3:47 a.m. I don't work at 3:47 a.m. Nobody does. The clinic is locked and alarmed. Then other patients started mentioning her. Mr. Chen, a regular diabetic patient, asked me, "Who's that woman who stands in the parking lot at night?" Mrs. Rodriguez said she'd seen someone matching Mrs. Holloway's description sitting in her car for hours just watching the clinic entrance. I started dreading Tuesdays, the way she'd hand me her copay in exact change. I started dreading Tuesdays, the way she'd hand me her copay in exact change, coins lined up by denomination, the way she'd whisper, "Thank you," in this hollow, breathy voice. The way her eyes followed me even when her head didn't move. During her 7th visit, I finally worked up the courage to ask, "Mrs. Holloway, is everything all right? You've been coming in quite frequently." She tilted her head too far, like her neck had extra joints. "I'm preparing," she said. "Preparing for what?" She tilted her head too far, like her neck had extra joints. "I'm preparing," she said. "Preparing for what?" That smile widened impossibly. "For when I bring the others." My blood went cold. "What others?" She didn't answer. Dr. Patterson called her back, and I watched her glide down the hallway with steps that seemed too smooth, too synchronized. That night, I stayed late finishing paperwork. Around 8 p.m., I heard the front door chime. We'd been closed for 2 hours. I'd locked that door myself. I walked to the reception area and froze. Mrs. Holloway stood in the waiting room, but she wasn't alone. There were 12 others with her, all standing perfectly still, all with that same wide smile, all staring at the exact same spot on the wall. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. They stood there in complete silence, not breathing, not blinking, just existing in a way that felt fundamentally wrong. Then, in perfect unison, all 13 heads turned toward me. "We're ready for our appointment," they said together in the exact same hollow voice. I ran. I didn't grab my purse, didn't turn off the lights. I ran. I didn't grab my purse, didn't turn off the lights. I just ran to my car and drove straight to the police station. 2 officers accompanied me back to the clinic. The front door was locked, just as I'd left it. The alarm was still armed. When we went inside, the waiting room was empty. But on every single chair sat a patient intake form, all filled out in identical handwriting, all with the same emergency contact, none needed. All with the same emergency contact, none needed. All with the same medications listed, sleep is unnecessary, and all scheduled for the following Tuesday at 9 a.m. The officers filed a report for breaking and entering, but I could see they thought I was losing it. Sarah gave me the rest of the week off, suggested I talk to someone. I quit 2 days later. But here's what keeps me awake at night. I drove past that clinic last Tuesday. The parking lot was full at 9 a.m. I looked through the window just for a second. The waiting room was packed with people, all sitting perfectly still, all staring at the same spot on the wall, all with that same smile. And in the back, behind the reception desk where I used to sit, there was Mrs. Holloway, checking them in, one by one, if you work in healthcare and you notice a patient who doesn't quite seem human, who breaks the small, unspoken rules of how people move and breathe and exist, don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it. Because sometimes the thing sitting in your waiting room isn't waiting to be healed. It's waiting to spread.